Welcome to CCN Midday News. I am your host, Catherine Krishna. Here are some of your top stories for today, April 13th. The U.S. Postal Service is investigating issues with absentee ballots in Wisconsin that went undelivered. U.S. farmers are forced to let crops rot and throw away milk while food bank demands soar. Trump allegedly asked Fauci if officials could let the coronavirus wash over U.S. Trump's press conferences reveal nothing more than his relentless self-pity. And Maryland governor calls the disproportionate coronavirus deaths among African Americans very disturbing. Larson appears to use racial slur on the NASCAR iRacing live stream. Let's get to the news. The United States Postal Service is conducting an investigation into issues that were reported with the delivery of absentee ballots in Wisconsin, which held its primary election this week despite concerns over the spread of the coronavirus. The investigation comes after Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican, and Tammy Baldwin, a Democrat, called on the USPS to look into claims absentee ballots that were requested ahead of the election but were never delivered or arrived only after the election had passed. Johnson and Baldwin sent a letter to the USPS on Thursday urging a probe into the missing ballots. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an unprecedented increase in requests for absentee ballots as more and more voters sought to comply with the public health guidelines and avoid potential risks to their health by avoiding in-person voting. Unfortunately, there have been numerous accounts from the state that the USPS failed to fulfill that critical function for some voters. The coronavirus has forced the entire world into disarray, but the food industry in particular, with restaurants closing or reshaping business models around slimmed down takeout menus, the dominoes are starting to fall for farmers who are suddenly have nowhere to take their food. And at the same time, as more people find themselves out of work, food banks are teeming with hungry families. But getting food from the fields to the hungry families that are in need isn't as simple as it sounds, industry experts do say. Farmers discard letters and dump milk. Much of the food grown for restaurants, which constitutes about half the market for produce, is nearly the end of its perishable life cycle. Researchers expect to see over 688.7 million decline in sales for farmers from March to May of 2020. Lettuce growers have been among the hardest hit in the Fresno County area. The economy grinded nearly to a halt. Longtime farmer John Harris of Harris Farms was growing 204 acres of lettuce, one of the giants in the industry, but all changed when the restaurant they supply turned off their stoves last week. Workers plowed under nearly 13 acres of fresh lettuce that had nowhere to go. It is a very unfortunate situation, but the demand all of a sudden had just fell apart. For many farmers, it's more cost-effective to let the crop rot in the field. They can't afford to harvest it, and then there's no market for it to go, and food banks can't cover the cost of the labor. President Donald Trump reportedly asked Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious disease expert and a key member of the White House's coronavirus task force, whether the U.S. officials could allow the coronavirus pandemic to, quote, wash over the country, the Washington Post reported. During a coronavirus task force meeting in the Situation Room last month, on the same day that the Trump administration ordered the travel to be suspended from the United Kingdom and Ireland in an effort to stem the spread of the virus, Trump reportedly asked Fauci, "Why don't we let this wash over the country?" Two anonymous sources familiar with the president's comments confirmed the question to the newspaper. Trump was reportedly also seeking to understand why herd immunity to the coronavirus had been rejected. Herd immunity occurs when a large amount of the population becomes immune either through infection, recovery, or inoculation. Mr. President, he said, many people would die, Fauci reportedly responded to the president's question. Appearing on MSNBC's Morning Joe, historian Jon Meacham expressed disgust with Donald Trump's daily press conferences that are ostensibly about the COVID-19 crisis that is ravaging the country, but have instead become a showcase of the president's out-of-control narcissism. Let's take a look.
The President of the United States making what has to be considered one of the most far-reaching and historic blunders and being ill-prepared for this pandemic and having a blizzard of lies all documented on tape from the end of January through now. And yet he continues. And what is so disturbing to me is the fact that it seems there's very little that anybody can do about it. Very little that people in his administration or in Congress or in the media can do about the fact that this president just keeps lying. He keeps refusing to move aggressively on testing, keeps refusing to do the very things that would help Americans go back to work.
Yeah, and the briefings are now experimental theater in weaponized narcissism, right? I mean, it's just this relentless self-pity. And he's let the world see exactly what goes on in his head. And he's an open synapse of these things and has a cannot, in fact, seem to learn from his mistakes. Now, what's so interesting to me, because I've adopted your mantra of that he's really a political day trader, I don't fully understand why, because this is in his interest as well as the national interest, for once they're aligned, why there would not be a testing Marshall Plan. Right. We have plenty of time to argue about the initial phases of this. Did it come from Europe, Asia? How did it get to New York? Where was the PPE? Where were the respirators? That's for the Pandemic Commission, right? That doesn't help anybody at this point. This is a three-pronged strategy. You got to take care of the sick people now. You've got to keep people from getting sick now. And you have to, as you've been saying, get the testing in order to open not just businesses, but schools. And you have to restore some normalcy to American life. And everybody you talk to, privately and publicly as well, says, look, nobody's going to go back to school if they're not, or get on planes if they don't have a high degree of confidence that the testing is in a place where you're not going to have this second bump. And my plea about this is we had a scientific revolution and we had an American revolution. And the two were actually somewhat linked. They were different verses of the same hymn, if you would. It was about reason instead of passion being the central engine in human affairs. this is a case where the American Revolution is now on trial because we won't pay attention to the lessons of the scientific one.
Maryland Republican Governor Larry Hogan on Sunday called the disproportionate coronavirus deaths among African Americans in his state very disturbing. The governor told ABC this week that he requested a study to track the number of cases and deaths by race because it wasn't being monitored by anyone, including the federal government. The study found that Black Marylanders make up 52% of the deaths from the coronavirus, despite making up only 31% of the state's population. He said that the state has backtracked and has data on race for 80% of the cases and plans to release it by zip code Sunday or Monday. The governor also told this week that he successfully advocated for the federal government, to consider the Baltimore-Washington corridor a hotspot for the virus. He said the area contains the largest population centers and the highest concentrations of Black and Hispanic communities. NASCAR driver Kyle Larson appeared to use the N-word during a live stream of Sunday's iRacing Pro Series event, apparently not realizing that his volume was on the online stimulation. Larson seemed to say to others on the stream, "You can't hear me? Hey, N-word." There was a stunned silence afterwards before Anthony Alfredo responded, "Kyle, you're talking to everyone, bud." Neither Larson nor NASCAR has made public comments regarding the incident. McDonald's and Credit One Bank, which sponsor Larson, have not responded to Sporting News requests for comment. Once again, thank you for watching CCN Midday News. Hope you enjoy. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also hit that notification button so you will never miss another news update. Have a great day. Peace.